Lesson 8.1, Video 1. Quadratic functions in factored form. Unit 8 is going to deal in greater depth quadratic functions. Before we get too much further into it though, let's discuss some key terminologies that we will need to know. A quadratic function is a degree 2 function, meaning that you have an x squared term present, which would make it look like this, and there's your x squared, or you could have it hidden. And by hidden I mean you would have a binomial or a multiplication that would need to occur, some form of distribution, and after you were to distribute you would end up with a squared term. So if I were to FOIL this, I would get 3x squared. First times first, outside would give us 3x, inside would give us negative 1x, and last is negative 1, which cleans up to be 3x squared plus 2x minus 1. Notice again that it has a power of 2, which makes it a degree 2 polynomial, otherwise known as a quadratic function. If you also remember, quad seems strange. Why would they call a degree 2 polynomial a quad? But a quad or a quadrilateral has 4 sides. If it has dimension x by x, the area is x squared. So a little bit of history there. Now, again to the point of greater detail. X-intercepts, if you remember, it's the x-coordinate where the graph crosses the horizontal axis. Now some key things here is that if I could give you 3 different scenarios where I would graph a parabola. In this case it would have 2 x-intercepts. I could graph it so it just touches the x-axis in one place. That's one x-intercept. Or I could even graph it so it doesn't touch it at all. So here's 2 x-intercepts, here's 1 x-intercept, and here is 0 x-intercepts. Y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. So for this one, it would intersect there, it would intersect there, and it would have a y-intersection of that point right there. The zero product property is something that will be used to help us solve quadratics, and it's used when we have factored or have found the factors, and it's a property that tells us that if two things are multiplied together and you get 0 for an answer, then either A or B or both must have been 0, because anything times 0 is 0, and that has value later on when we try to solve. At this point I want to do a little bit of a graph here for reference and terminology. Is that if I ask for a solution to quadratics, I can ask you to graph it, and if you graph it, the solutions would be considered the x-intercepts. And if I ask you to factor, solve it by factoring, then your solution would be found by using the zero product property. In that case, they're called zeros. Still considered a solution, but they call them zeros because it's called the zero, because it uses the zero product property. And then I could ask you to solve using the quadratic formula, which we'll talk about later. And when you solve it that way, the solutions are called roots. So a little brief view there, different terminologies, all represented or represent solutions. And this ends Lesson 8.1, Video 1.